Jimin's greatest betrayal destroyed BTS. Jungkook's screams broke the night. Dark secrets revealed. Can they survive? Read the story. In a world that glorifies friendship without limits, what happens when the person you trust the most is the one who pierces you the most? The story takes us into the unfathomable darkness behind the glittering spotlight. As one night in Seoul changes everything for BTS forever. Jungkook's screams cut through the night, echoing through the usually laughter-filled empty halls of the BTS studio. Blood splattered on the wooden floor. The smell of iron sharply pierced the nose. Behind the cracked glass of the rehearsal room, the figure stood. Jimin. Jungkook's eyes widened, filled with shock and fear he had never felt before. His body trembled, not only because of the pain in his bruised ribs, but because of the broken trust he had held so tightly. Jimin looked at her emotionlessly, coldly, like a stranger. His hand, which had been creating the choreography that brought their dreams together, was now stained red. "Sorry," Jimin said, his voice breaking like a stepped glass. "I had no choice." The sound of footsteps was heard from a distance. Jungkook tried to get up, every movement piercing his body, as if the world was conspiring to hold him back. What happened? Why Jimin? A few hours earlier, they had all gathered in the rehearsal room. New comeback spirit. Promise of eternal friendship. Taeyong's laughter, Namjoon's embrace, Junggi's sarcasm, Hoseok's fussiness, and a strange look from Jimin that Jungkook ignored at that time. "Tomorrow we announce something big," Namjoon said. "BTS will be more than just a group. We will be living legends." But something in Jimin's eyes at the time, a shadow, an inner fight, was probably the last warning they missed. Jungkook crept up to the wall, his body leaning back while catching his breath, trying to understand. "You betray us," he whispered. Jimin closed his eyes for a moment. Her tears fell, mixed with the blood on her hands. "I betrayed myself," he replied. "I choose a family you don't know." Before Jungkook could ask, before another voice could be heard, the studio door burst open. A masked silhouette entered. Not the police, not the manager, not anyone Jungkook recognized. And amid the chaos, Jungkook realizes. This is bigger than just a personal betrayal. This is the destruction of BTS from the inside. "Why me? Why am I still alive?" Jungkook whispered hoarsely, blood drying on his lips, while a pair of foreign eyes stared at him in the darkness. The air in the room was heavy, full of dust and the smell of rusty metal. His hands were tied roughly behind an old iron chair that creaked every time he moved. The wounds on his body began to throb. The pain became a silent companion that reminded him that this was not a nightmare. "It's real." In the corner of the room, Jimin stood with his back to her, his shoulders tense. Never have they felt so close. Jungkook tried to speak, but only a weak moaning sound came out. Silence. Then, the sound of footsteps. Heavy, slow, tearing calm. Someone just came in. Not Jimin. Not anyone he knows. The silhouette carried a large file, which he threw onto the worn-out table in front of Jungkook. Papers were scattered. Some blurry photos were visible, photos of him, photos of BTS, photos of his childhood, even photos of his family. "Your little toy is done," said the heavy voice. Cold, without a soul. "It's time to play by our rules." Jungkook gritted his teeth. "Who are you guys?" The silhouette approached, and for the first time Jungkook could see his face. The half-mask broke, revealing a huge scar that ran across his face. His eyes, like a black abyss, showed no mercy. "We are the result of past sins that you thought you had forgotten," he replied. In a hotel room in Tokyo, many years ago, when BTS was just starting to go global, there was a small event that they all agreed to never talk about again. A rejected contract. A promise broken. Jungkook, back then, thought it was over. Apparently not. Back to the present situation. Jimin finally spoke, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "I didn't want this to happen, but they are. They threatened my family," he said. Jungkook looked at her, the pain in his chest worse than the wounds on his body. "Why don't you believe us? Why don't you come to us, Hyung?" There was something in Jimin's eyes, despair, fear, and unspoken guilt. For a moment, just for a moment, he looked like the Jimin he knew. Then the door creaked open again. The third silhouette entered. Higher, the step is more confident. Jungkook recognized him from the shadow of his body alone. "That's not possible," he thought. "Not him." Jungkook's eyes widened, almost jumping from his chair. Someone from within BTS's own family had betrayed long before Jimin. His head is spinning. Memories flooded in, their first hug in a small rehearsal room. The nights of overtime while writing lyrics together. The tears that fell while receiving their first award. Is it all a lie? Suddenly, alarms went off throughout the building. The lights went out. Screams were heard from the hallway outside. Jungkook put in all his last effort, stomping the chair back. The chair was partially broken. The pain was excruciating, but the adrenaline kept him going. Jimin shouted, "Jungkook, don't." But it's too late. With the rest of his strength, Jungkook crawled towards the small window in the corner. Broken glass hurt his hand. Blood dripped, yet he didn't care. The cold night air hit her face as she crawled out and was instantly met by a pair of black shoes. Someone was waiting for him outside. "I warned you, Jungkook." "But you believe too much," the voice said, softly, before immersing Jungkook into the darkness. The night air pierced her skin. The salty taste of blood dried on her lips. Jungkook tried to struggle, but the foreign hand's grip was like iron. They dragged him through the narrow alley behind the building, hasty steps echoing on the stone walls. In the distance, the sound of sirens was faintly audible, a small sign that the world outside was still running, still normal, but not for him, not anymore. Jungkook turned his head. The man's face was half covered with a black mask, only his eyes were visible, sharp, full of old wounds that never healed. "I am. Who the hell are you?" Jungkook hissed with the rest of his energy. The figure stopped. "Take off the mask slowly," and Jungkook's world collapses in one blink. Namjoon, a leader he respected, the one who taught him to endure, the only person who used to say, "Whatever happens, we're still family." But tonight, Namjoon's gaze was cold, frozen, numb. "All this, Jungkook, all this because we were lied to," whispered Namjoon, his voice cracking. "You don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. You think we're free? No, we're just puppets." He pulled Jungkook closer until there was only breath space between them. This betrayal, necessary. Jungkook felt his world spinning. "So, this was your plan from the beginning?" Jungkook's voice broke, like glass crashing to the floor. Namjoon didn't answer. He looked at Jungkook with a look of guilt and determination. 2 years earlier, in a secret meeting room, Namjoon meets someone unknown, a dark agent from a large corporation who wants to take over the BTS name. They promise freedom, promise that the members will no longer be blackmailed, but with a great price: betrayal from within. Destroy BTS's image, then rebuild it under their control. And Namjoon, in silence, say yes. Back to the main scene. It's not just about us anymore. "Jungkook," Namjoon said, releasing his grip. "It's about surviving in a world that swallows you up if you shine too much." But before Jungkook could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed again. Jimin emerged from a dark corner, his face wet with tears. "He's right, Jungkook," muttered Jimin. "I had no choice." Jungkook took a step back, his body shaking violently. The wind is hunting. It hurts not only from physical wounds, but from cracks in trust that will never heal. Then, Jungkook's voice croaked. "Why did you let me live?" "Shut up." The night wind moved their shadows on the walls, until finally, from the other direction, a new voice was heard. "Because I need you to stay alive for the next plan." Someone else walked over, someone whose voice is too familiar. "Taeyong," exclaimed Jungkook, his tone trembling. "Don't tell me." "You too?" Taeyong just stared at him, his eyes blank, almost like everyone else's. He doesn't have to answer. Everything is clear. That night, among the cold air and open wounds, Jungkook realizes he was alone. Jungkook's heart pounded wildly in his chest. His breathing was heavy, like his lungs refused to work. In a split second, the world seemed to stop. Taeyong stood stiffly in front of the time bomb, his eyes empty, as if he himself had given up. Without thinking, Jungkook turned and ran. His sneakers hit the asphalt, galloping. The building's emergency exit awaits at the end of the hallway. Behind him, the beeping sound of a digital timer continued to haunt, as if chasing him faster than time itself. Crock. The bullet hit the wall to Jungkook's right. He turned his head briefly. Namjoon, with a small pistol in hand, his expression blank. They really wanted to finish him off. "Hyung," Jungkook shouted, but the answer was just the sound of the next bullet. Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? Fragments of the past flashed in his head. Laugh at their training. Promises to stay together. Long nights in the studio while sharing secrets. Is everything a lie? As he nears the door, Jungkook sees two options: get out onto public roads and maybe hit the bullseye, Down the fire escape to the basement, a narrow and dark path, but more hidden. Residence times 632, sweat flooded. His body. If I go on the road, I die. But if I go to the basement, without much thought, he broke through towards the basement. The lights flicker. The smell of metal and rust pierced his nose. Behind the narrow hallway, Jungkook heard the sound of quick steps. Someone's after him. Not Namjoon, not Taeyoung, not Jimin. Someone else. Someone who from the very beginning managed this all from behind the scenes. Who? Suddenly, a hand pulled him behind the pillar. Jungkook almost screamed, but the hand quickly covered his mouth. Shut up. If you want to survive, come with me. Suga Jung Hyung has always been known as the quietest, who rarely shows his emotions. But tonight, his face is hard, his breathing is heavy. There was a small scar on the corner of her lip. No. You're the only one not involved, Jungkook, Suga whispered. All of them, even Hoseok, already surrendered. Jungkook wanted to ask questions, wanted to demand answers, but the sound of bombs from the top of the building began to be heard. Bum. The whole building shook. Dust is flying. The alarm roared. Suga pulled Jungkook deeper into the narrow hallway. While walking quickly, Suga said softly, as if every word contained poison, "There's something you never know, Jungkook. Something makes them all choose to destroy BTS." Jungkook looked at her, his breath choked. Suga stopped, looked directly into Jungkook's eyes, then whispered one short sentence that hit hard. BTS, from the very beginning, was part of a secret experiment. If I die here, at least I die as myself. Jungkook took his last breath before jumping into the darkness. The sound of steps approaching, but a flash of flashlights swept through the dark hallway of the basement. Dust flew through the air, making breathing heavy and piercing. In front of him, Suga looked straight ahead. His expression was sharp, full of tension. Behind him, the shadows of his Hyungs, once family, now hunters. Jungkook only has 1 second to choose. Trust Suga or run away alone. Jungkook's chest beats wildly. But when his eyes met Suga's eyes, he found something unseen in the other's eyes: sincerity. Hyung, he whispered. Suga only nodded once. Then, without further ado, pulled Jungkook into a narrow passage on the side. A secret passage that Jungkook didn't even know existed. They ran. Race against time, sound, and fear. Every step felt like a knife in the back. The light of a flashlight chased them. Its rays flashed through the cracks of the walls. To the right, hissed Suga. They jump over leaky pipes, sneak past creaky old steel doors. The smell of musty and rust filled the air. Suddenly, BRUK, Jungkook tripped over something. A body, corpse. That Jungkook's eyes widened. The chest feels cramped. How many people have died from all this? He thought in horror. Suga didn't let him stop. Don't look back, Kook. Focus. As they finally stopped in an empty room underground, lit only by dim lights that flickered, Suga began to talk. Since we debuted, everything has been arranged. Jungkook could only stare, his eyes burning with a sense of betrayal. Suga continued, his voice heavy, as if every word made him bleed. BTS is a project to create a group with global influence, in order to be controlled. Silence. Jungkook shook his head hard. Nonsense, he whispered. No way. But in his heart, something was already beginning to crack. Suga approached, handing over something, a small pen drive. All the evidence is here. But holding this means you're challenging something bigger than you think. Jungkook looked at the little thing. His hands shook. Is he really ready to know the truth? Or is it better to remain in a beautiful lie, remembering the faces of his Hyungs, recalling all the memories? Jungkook almost cried. Is it all fake? But as she remembers Jimin's betrayal, the betrayal that opened the deepest wounds, a small fire burns in her heart. I should know. His hand grabbed the flash. Suddenly, boom, the iron door was thrown open. Namjoon, Jimin, Taeyoung, Hoseok enter with an army of men dressed in black. They're all armed. Namjoon stepped forward, his voice heavy and cold. Give me that stick, Jungkook. Now. Suga stood in front of Jungkook, protecting. You can't keep controlling him, shouted Suga. Jimin looked at Jungkook, his eyes red and full of guilt, but no remorse. I'm doing this for you. Jimin said softly. For all of us. The world is darker than you think. Taeyong lowered his head, as if unable to look at Jungkook. Hoseok held back the tears, but brandished a weapon. What are you all doing? Jungkook whispered, his voice broken. We are family. Namjoon tightened his grip on the gun. It's bigger than family, don't move. Namjoon's voice boomed, but Jungkook had already pressed the little red button in his hand. In a moment, boom. An explosion shook the basement. Thick smoke flooded the air, the lights went out, and screams were heard in all directions. Suga pulled Jungkook in full force. Running through the smoke, Jungkook's heart was racing, almost torn from his chest. The sound of gunfire echoed many times. Bullets stuck into a stone wall near their heads. An inch difference could mean death. Left, Suga shouted. They broke through a broken door into a narrow tunnel that was only enough for one adult to crawl through. The smell of wet earth and blood mixed in the air. Behind them, the sound of the footsteps of the pursuers was approaching. Jungkook turned his head, briefly seeing Taeyong running with red, conflicted eyes, but still pointing a gun at them. They crawl in complete darkness. Jungkook's hands rubbed against the sharp stones. Blood began to flow from his palms. Hyung, Jungkook whispered with intermittent breath. Why are you helping me? Suga was only silent for a few seconds, then answered in a heavy voice. Because I once believed in that dream, just like you. As they pause in a small space at the end of the tunnel, Jungkook feels a bone-chilling fatigue. The faces of his Hyung kept spinning in his mind. What made everything break down like this? When did our dreams become tools? He wanted to cry, but there was no time. Suga finally reveals everything. With a trembling voice, he said, It's not just Jimin, it's not just Namjoon. There's someone bigger, the one who rules us all. Jungkook held his breath. Who? His insistence, Suga looked straight into her eyes. The new CEO, someone you've never met in person. He came quietly after we dominated the world. He changed BTS's purpose, from a music group to a global political tool. Jungkook could hardly believe it. The whole world knows BTS as hope, as love, as pride. All that fake. Suga shook his head, as if he could read her mind. Not fake. We made it real. But they're using it. Not having had time for them to digest everything. The sound of the clatter of new steps echoed. But this is different, more organized. More creepy. It's not just their Hyung chasing now. The organization itself has sent its elite troops, men in black with cutting-edge technology, advanced military equipment. Their one purpose: capture or kill Jungkook and Suga. They came out of the tunnel, found themselves in an abandoned area of the city, the night shrouded in fog. Sirens wailed in the distance. Tiny drones are flying overhead, scanning every corner. They run between old buildings, jump over rusty fences, avoid the glare of lights. Jungkook's breath almost broke. His bones were screaming for rest. But one mistake means the end between escapes. Jungkook felt a great shock in himself. Each step carries a load of questions. Can he trust Suga completely? What is the point of surviving if everything he loves is already destroyed? What does BTS mean if all this is just manipulation? Her tears mixed with sweat. He did not just run from enemies. He also ran from himself. Suddenly, an electric net was fired at them. Suga manages to dodge, but Jungkook gets entangled. His body convulsed, falling to the ground violently. The armed forces approached quickly, drawing weapons at him. The last second, Suga turned around, raised his gun, but a large man in black uniform managed to shoot him in the shoulder. Suga fell to his knees, blood flowing. Jungkook, he shouted. With the rest of his energy, Jungkook's eyes struggled to stay open. Everything starts to blur. Jungkook, do you want to live? Then destroy them all, whispered the voice from the darkness. Jungkook's eyes slowly opened. His head was pounding hard, as if he had just been hit by a hammer. He tried to move, but his hands and feet were chained to a cold metal chair. The glow of neon lights dazzled from above, piercing his gaze. Around him only darkness. The smell of iron, sweat, and something more bitter, fear. The concrete walls are rough, cracked here and there. The sound of water dripping rhythmically, like a clock counting the time of death. Jungkook blinked, breathing heavily. In front of him, A large man stood up. His face was not clear, covered with shadows. "Welcome to Base Alpha," the man said in a cold voice. Jungkook's internal conflicts, guilt and fear. In his heart, Jungkook was raging. "This is all my fault. If only I had trusted my instincts earlier, maybe." BTS will not be destroyed. Fear not at his mind. Not just the fear of death, but fear will be a tool, another doll in someone else's game. The man threw a tablet on the table in front of him. On the screen, photos of BTS members point one by one. Jimin, Namjoon, Taeyong, Hoseok, Suga, Jin, everything. Red crosses are crossed out onto some faces. "We can make you free, Jungkook," he said as he walked around his chair. "The conditions are simple work for us. Kill the rest." Jungkook froze. His ears are buzzing. "They want me to kill my own family." In the next few hours, they did not touch his body. No whipping. No beating. There is only psychological pressure. The videos are manipulative, played over and over again. Video of Taeyong pointing a gun at Jungkook. Footage of Jimin signing a treason contract. Namjoon's words about sacrificing one for the sake of the other. Each clip pierced deeper into his heart. Make him ask, who really betrayed him? Was the brotherhood ever real? Is he worth surviving? Just as his mind was about to collapse, suddenly all the lights went out. Silence. Gripping. There was a gunshot from a distance. Scream. Broken glass. Then, footsteps quickly approached. "Wake up, Kook," whispered a very familiar voice. Jungkook's eyes widened when he saw the figure. Jin, the genie, in his dark uniform, held a weapon, his face full of wounds, but his eyes still shone with the same determination as before. "We don't have time. Trust me with your life." The genie smashed the chain with a small tool. They ran through a narrow corridor. Bullets rained down on them. The walls collapsed around them. Jin protects Jungkook with his body, fending off attacks while looking for a way out. "Why you?" Jungkook gasped, half-dragged. "I almost believed them too," Jin said bitterly. "But you are the only one who is pure, Kook." They hid in an empty room, both gasping for breath. Jin looked at him deeply. "Whatever happens after this, never let them change who you are," Jin said slowly, full of emotion. Jungkook clasped Jin's arm tightly, as if afraid to let go. "I can still trust someone." But before they can go any further, a voice sounded from behind. "That's enough, Taeyong." They turned, and there, standing Taeyong, with the gun raised. But this time, there were tears running down her cheeks. "Sorry," Jungkook whispered about, "I was told to choose. Betray one person or lose all of you." Taeyong whispered as he pointed the gun at me. Silence. It was so dense that Jungkook could even hear his own heartbeat. The gun in Taeyong's hand trembled. Her lips trembled. His eyes, once full of laughter and warmth, now left only wounds. The walls are covered with dust. The broken lights flickered weakly above them. The sounds of gunfire from a distance were still faint, like another world slowly disappearing. In the room, there were only Jungkook, Jin, and Taeyong. And a truth that hurts more than any bullet. Taeyong lowered his head. The gun in his hand fell to the floor with a loud bang. "I am." Taeyong's breathing is heavy, choked up. "I am the reason why Jimin betrayed. I was the one who signed the deal. I was the one who sold us, just to save everyone." Jungkook sculpted. His brain refused to accept those words. No way. But in the depths of his heart, he knows, Taeyong couldn't possibly lie under these circumstances. Flashback in Taeyong's head. That night, in a hotel room. A man in black robes offered a terrible choice. "One of you must fall, or everything will be destroyed." Taeyong, with trembling hands, signed the contract. "Save BTS," he said in his heart. "Even if it means sacrificing Jungkook, the person he cares about the most." Jungkook took a step back. It hurts. It hurts more than any physical injury. "Why?" His voice broke. "Why don't you trust us? Why don't you trust me?" Tears flowed down Taeyong's cheeks. "Because I'm afraid," he said softly. "Afraid that if I choose honesty, you will all die." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approached. "Find them. Don't let anyone get away." Jin raised his weapon, ready for battle. "You two finish this business," he said sharply. "I hold them." Jin runs out, leaving Jungkook and Taeyong facing each other, caught between anger, love, and guilt. Taeyong kneels in front of Jungkook. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, his voice hoarse. "I just want you to know. I never stopped loving our friendship." Jungkook closed his eyes, his chest quivering with pain. Can I really hate the person who did everything to save me? Can I forgive the betrayal that killed my trust? If you want answers, Jungkook, you must be prepared to lose everything. Jimin's voice sounded from inside the dark hallway. It echoes like a curse. Heavy rain poured on the roof of the old building. The streetlights flickered weakly, creating creepy shadows on the deserted sidewalks. Jungkook ran. Breathing is heavy. His legs were bleeding, dragging on wet asphalt. His hand held tightly to the crumpled photo of Taeyong found in the empty headquarters last night. One last clue. An address with shaky handwriting. It brought him to this place. An old house on the outskirts of the city, where all the answers and destruction await him. Inside him, two voices fought. Revenge, burning the chest, exacting revenge for the betrayal of the imprinted. Longing, mute yet strong. Wants to hug his old friends and return all as they once were. But is there still first to be saved? Jungkook thought bitterly. The old wooden door creaked as Jungkook pushed it. The room was empty. There was only a wooden chair in the center, on which Jimin was sitting. His head was down. His hands were tied to chains hanging from the ceiling. Jungkook pointed the gun at him. Why? She cried, her voice breaking among the crazy rain outside. Why did you betray us? Jimin nodded slowly. Under her puffy eyes, there was a thin smile that hurt more than ridicule. Because I have no choice. Jimin spoke slowly, like someone who had already buried his fear. I didn't accept the offer because I hate BTS, but because I want to save one of us. Jungkook stiffened. What do you mean? Jimin closed his eyes. 3 months ago. I know someone's after us. One must be sacrificed to keep the other alive. Why didn't you tell me? Exclaimed Jungkook. Because I know you. Taeyong and others will never allow it. You will choose to fall together. A bitter smile appeared on Jimin's face. But I'm too cowardly to lose you. So I chose to be that monster. Suddenly, the sound of broken glass. The men of the mysterious organization burst in, merciless faces, fully armed. Jimin turned to Jungkook, his dead expression turning into hard determination. Go, Jungkook. Let me fix everything. But Jungkook didn't move. He raised his gun, turned to face the invaders. They fought side by side for the first time since the betrayal, as in the old days. Although blood flows, although their breathing is choked, there was something shining in their eyes again. Trust. In the midst of the chaos, Jimin fell to his knees, blood oozing from the wound in his stomach. Jungkook, tell them. I never stopped loving you. Jungkook's tears mixed with the rain. I'll take you home, he whispered loudly, enduring an emotional wound worse than his physical. This is the last resort, Jungkook. Taeyong's voice sounded between the earth-shaking blasts. It was still raining heavily, sweeping away the ruins of the city that had been destroyed. In the middle of the ruins, Jungkook stood trembling, holding Jimin's immobile hand. However, in front of him, Taeyong stood, with empty but contrite eyes. In his hand, the small detonator flashed red. The city that once lived is now a cemetery. The ruins of the buildings were towering, and the blazing fire consumed what was left. The wind brought thick smoke, and the stinging smell of metal filled the air. Jungkook looked at Taeyong, still surprised and incredulous. It can sense every second that is moving at a slower speed than usual, and in his heart, the question swirled. Couldn't stop. Is this the end of BTS? Inside him, Jungkook is caught between two choices that none of them are right. Saving Taeyong. If he stops Taeyong now, then everything, BTS, their friendship, even unspoken love will be destroyed. They will be destroyed by unimaginable enemies, and everything will be in vain. However, if he chooses to save Taeyong, will he be able to forgive himself after all that happened? Saved by Jimin. But, on the other hand, Jimin, who even now lies motionless, is a picture of extraordinary sacrifice. Even if Jimin betrayed, did he deserve to be punished like this? Can a big mistake overshadow the good that once existed? I can't choose, Taeyong. I can't lose you both. Jungkook shouted, his voice drowned out by the approaching explosion. Taeyong looked at Jungkook with eyes that radiated such deep sadness and regret. Jungkook, his voice is almost inaudible, yet full of hidden power. I don't want to be your enemy, Taeyong said, his voice hoarse. I don't want to be the one who betrays BTS. But this is the only way out. The only way we can stay alive. Jungkook grasped Jimin's hand tighter, biting his lip. I don't believe you, he said softly, though his heart felt like it was torn apart. But I know you wouldn't blow it all up if there was another option. Taeyong nodded, and his eyes lit up with despair. You're right, Jungkook. The choice is there, and I am. I just hope this is the right path. Jungkook ran towards Taeyong, with tears beginning to fall unstoppably. Jungkook's hand reached for the detonator, gripping it with confidence. Nothing can be destroyed anymore, Jungkook whispered, his voice firm and full of decision. With one move, Jungkook turns off the detonator. Taeyong looked at him, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. However, Jungkook could only look into her eyes, and then turned to take Jimin away. However, the next second, a powerful explosion occurred. The back door of the house exploded, and the sound of screams accompanied the chaos that consumed everything there. External conflict, the last enemy. Suddenly, a group of uniformed soldiers emerged from the shadows of the ruins, each armed to the teeth, ready to put an end to it all. Jungkook had no other choice. He had to fight, or everything he fought for would be in vain. Together with Taeyong, they make their way through the streets filled with enemies, resisting every attack with the remaining strength in their bodies. Jimin, though unconscious, was in their midst, like a symbol of sacrifice to be honored. As they run through the snatching gunfire around them, Jungkook turns once again to Taeyong, who was struggling beside him. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're still part of BTS." Taeyong smiled bitterly, though he didn't look entirely convinced. However, at that, there is one thing for sure. BTS is still there, and they will never give up. As the morning begins to shine on the ruins of the destroyed city, a message suddenly appears on Jungkook's phone screen. A message from an unknown name. "It's not over yet. We're still after you." But even more surprising, there is a terrible photo. It was a photo of Jimin, seen alive, standing next to a very familiar figure. Who do you trust, Jungkook? An open and continuous ending. After this great battle, BTS's fate remains dependent on one big question. Who can they trust? Jungkook must make the final decision about their future. Jungkook is caught up in the final battle after Jimin's greatest betrayal. A deadly choice will change their lives forever.